All righty, well. All right, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this public annual meeting of the Business Board. I'm pleased to welcome members of the press and public who are able to join this virtual meeting online. In terms of technical arrangements, the meeting is being held by Zoom and will be live recorded for governance purposes. If you experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, please refresh your connection in the first instance. If it becomes apparent that we've lost members and we're no longer quorate, it may be necessary to adjourn the meeting. Apologies for absence. Nick?
Thanks, Chair. No, we've not had any apologies for absence.
Okay, I did have a little note earlier from Eileen Milner to say that she would have liked to have joined us, but she's otherwise engaged and she's probably listening in on the live feed. So if you are, welcome, Eileen. I'll begin by calling the names of all members of the Business Board in alphabetical order to establish their presence for the record. Tina. Hi, Tina. Councillor Wayne Fitzgerald.
Yes, President Austin, thank you.
Hey, Wayne. Mike Hurd.
Present, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Faye Holland.
Hi, Austin. Yes, I'm present. And I did send advance notice that I would need to leave at 4 p.m.
All right, lovely. Thank you, Faye.
Thank you.
Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson. I see Nick. Good afternoon, Nick.
Hello, Austin. Sorry.
Amir.
Yeah.
Amir, thank you. Welcome. Al Kingsley.
Austin, yes.
Jason.
President Austin.
Andy Neely.
Afternoon.
Nitin Patel.
Hi.
Nitin. Rebecca.
Afternoon.
Andy Williams.
Hi, Austin.
Hi, Andy. And myself, Austin Adams. We are also required to record the attendance of the Business Board Section 73 officer. So could Rob Emery please confirm his presence?
I'm here, Austin.
Thank you, Rob. Perfect. Turning to declarations of interest. This is an opportunity to declare pecuniary interests or any other conflicts of interests. Do members have any conflicts to declare? I don't see any. Please shout if I've missed something. Perfect. Turning then to the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of September. We are asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of September 2021. So can I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function? Any issues with the previous minutes? No. Perfect. I see no objection, so we'll take that as carried. Do officers have any further updates on the report to report on the action log to those already included in the agenda? There were a number of open actions in the minutes. I went through them earlier. They all look to either have been included or largely closed out. But are there any comments? Anything anyone would like to raise? All right, perfect. You guys doing a good job of keeping the action log going and closing the items down. Thank you. Turning to public questions, as this is a public meeting, public questions were invited and a protocol was published with the agenda, although I can confirm that no questions were submitted. Is that your understanding too, Nick?
That's right, Chair. No questions were submitted.
Perfect. Then we'll move to the body of the agenda, item 2.1, the budget and performance report, please. I understand Vanessa is going to present the performance report.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, board members. Our normal report is presented today with the outturn position for the revenue and capital business lines as normal. The funding shows, if I discuss the revenue area first, if that's okay, and if there's any questions, we can deal with that, and then we can move on to capital from here as normal. The revenue is showing relatively little income alteration to the budget and to the forecast. The only difference that is showing on the report at the moment is the growth hub grants that we discussed at the previous meeting that is now being put into the MTFP. So that's an increase in funding. With regard to the revenue expenditure, there are a few lines that are showing underspend at this moment in time. The largest one being the growth company services budget line, and that's been detailed in the report as in explaining why that the income or the revenue hasn't been expended to the level that we had originally anticipated, which is due to the contractual agreements not actually being in place as yet. I have given some more details around some of the other smaller lines, which I hope is sufficient explanation. However, I'm happy to accept any questions that you may have. The only other table relating to the energy is relating to energy. There will be some relatively significant changes to these, but these will be going to the CA board in January for a reprofiling, mostly down to the fact that there have been a number of changes around the public sector decarbonisation budget, which will be reprofiled into next year. And there have been some difficulties surrounding the Green Homes grant, particularly with managing agents and the supply chain, which we have discussed at some update meetings. Before I proceed on to capital, are there any questions on the revenue sections?
Questions? Well, looks to be going in the right direction, Vanessa, thank you.
Okay, I'll proceed on to capital. This is a slightly less than the revenue side. The only funding we are due to receive this year for the capital is for the Getting Building Fund, which has already been received, which is allocated to the phase 2 of the university. The remainder of the capital projects are some leftover ones from the LGF projects, which have got time limited, and they all appear to be spending relatively well, and a few others such as the AEB Innovation Fund and the phase 2 programme. The capital for the energy and market towns, which is included in this report this year, this meeting as requested at the last one, breaks down the spend for both the individual market towns that have been approved by the CA board, as well as for the Green Home grant programs. And as discussed, there will be some changes for the Green Home Energy Programme, which is going to the CA board in January because of the timeline extension. And also there will be a reprofiling of some of the market towns going into January board as well, due to some delays because of COVID and some of the local areas not being able to spend their funding as quickly as anticipated. Again, I believe that's most of the stuff on capital. If anyone has anything on that before I proceed.
Just a question, I'm not sure whether it's for you or John, maybe, Vanessa, but the Green Home Grant Capital Programme showing a considerable shortfall. I mean, we don't understand all the moving parts within that, perhaps to the extent that we could, but do we, based on what we know at the moment, do we still believe that that's going to leave money on the table of that order of magnitude?
It's a very difficult, and it's a very much a movable feast at the moment. There have been a number of concerns across the whole country with regard to the programme. And that's not just from our energy hub, it's from the other 5 energy hubs in the country. The difficulty is the supply chain. The Green Homes Capital Grant Programme is what they call it as LAD 2. And this is running off the back of LAD 1A and LAD 1B. BEIS have extended the length of time for LAD 1A and LAD 1B, which has in turn tied up the supply chain for LAD 2, which means that we don't necessarily have the facility to deliver everything. All hubs are reporting this difficulty to BEIS, and BEIS are very much aware of the problems that everyone is being faced with actually trying to deliver this by the end of March. At this moment in time, there is no real guidance from BEIS whether we are able to extend it or not. However, the gut feel is that it will potentially extend, so we will not have to return the money. I know John's got his hand up, so he may wish to add some further detail to that.
John?
Thanks, Vanessa. Well, I did put my hand up. You did such a brilliant job then. That you said virtually everything I would have said. I think 2 points of emphasis I'd make. Number one is this is a national problem, and I think overwhelmingly the chances are BEIS will give all the energy hubs more time to set up the supply chains. At the end of the day, this is a piece of government legislation that is ahead of, which is the whole point of government in some extent, is ahead of the supply chains. Government has a will to retrofit lots of houses with green technology, but the supply chains aren't really there. So we're having to build them as we go, hence the delays. We are, as officers, looking to suggest in January a change to the terms of reference of the business board to actually manage this particular activity at the Energy Hub. The Market Towns is also a programme that goes direct to CA board, and we're going to suggest the business board manage that. And of course, the Shared Prosperity Fund next year would normally go straight to CA board, and we're going to suggest that the business board manage that and produce recommendations. So what I'm saying there is the business board will be involved more going forward in the Energy Hub, and I think bring a great deal of wisdom to officers in terms of how to build supply chains to make this programme work.
Indeed. Therein lies the opportunity, John, I think, for local businesses. I see Andy's got his hand raised. Andy? Thank you, John.
Yeah, I was going to come on to the Market Towns if I could, and it was really a question for Vanessa and a couple of things really. I mean, I understand completely the reason for the delays. The first question was whether there's anything we can learn from the experience of Ely, which seems to have at least a bit further ahead in terms of spend and therefore presumably commissioning work. And is there anything we can learn from that that could feed into the other Market Town studies? And then linked to that, are these all getting commissioned as independent studies? Because when you look at the total budget for the Market Towns, there's quite a lot of money available there. Presumably there's some purchasing power that we could use if we integrated some of the spend rather than just allowed each individual town to go off and commission a different set of consultants.
If it's okay with you, I will ask Domenico to answer those questions, as he's very heavily involved in the whole bidding process. So if you're okay with that, Chair.
Yes, indeed. Dom.
Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you, Andy, for your questions. So the Market Towns, we did make a national allocation of £1 million per town. And we did explore back in the day when the prospectus was being developed that we could look at economies of scale to see if there was any opportunity for local authorities to work together to make savings. Unfortunately, the local authorities were at different phases and at different stages in their delivery and their timelines to kind of really make that effective, and within the kind of pressures that we're under to get the programme up and running and shifted to implementation. On your first point about East Cams, East Cams did take a bit of a slightly different approach to the other Market Towns because they were a little bit behind the curve, and they started the process a little bit later in the day than Fenland and Huntingdonshire councils. So that additional piece of feasibility work was really needed to kind of draw that all together and really focus what they were going to spend that remaining allocation on. And we're seeing those coming through at the moment. I've got 3 going to board, the Combined Authority board this month. And then we'll be seeing that, the last of that remaining allocation spent just in the new year. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Don. John, is your hand up from previously, or do you want to come back?
It is a new one. Just to also respond to Andy on the economies of scale. Well, whilst we didn't do a group procurement for these studies, in fact, we did coordinate those procurements, and Metro Dynamics, I can't remember the proportion of them, but Metro Dynamics did pick up a number of them, and there were economies of scale in that delivery.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Andy. Maybe some value when we get to the end of that programme of doing a bit of a look back at opportunities that we might have missed in that respect. Dom?
Just to kind of close it off, yes. So we are looking at what we can, lessons learned and areas where we can improve delivery of the Market Towns programme if we wanted to kind of continue that going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Back to you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Chair. The last table from me is the summary funding overview, which involves all the recycled revenue and capital. As mentioned in the report, it has not changed since the last presentation to the board. However, we have had confirmation that we will be receiving funding back from the CAM, the IMET and the Wisbeach. However, I have not yet reported it as the funding has not yet hit the accounts. I would also like to point out that due to the timelines of publishing these reports, the figures you are seeing are actually the end of August rather than the end of September. However, no funding for any of those 3 projects has as yet been received, so there's no verbal update to give you on that one.
No. Have we got a feel for that at all, timing wise now?
One CAM depends on when they finish the dormancy or putting the company into dormancy, but they have agreed that the figures will be coming back to us. Wisbeach is a case of the repatriation of funds from council through to the CPCA, and then the CPCA take that on. I know that I think the figures have all been agreed, but as yet I haven't been told of any likely implication. Both Steve or Rob may possibly be able to give some additional information on either of those if they're present.
Okay, I see Mike's got his hand raised. Mike?
Yes, I was just going to refer to something on table 4 and ask if there's any follow-on for the enterprise zones.
Yes, the enterprise zones is a 25-year project. However, just due to what I'm able to fit into the tables, I haven't got further information on.
So do the current enterprise zones get continued funding then?
Yes, they do. Yes, it's from when it started about 2-3 years ago. Yes.
Okay, I was talking to the sort of director at the Lancaster Business Park. He wasn't quite sure what was happening after March. So.
Well, I haven't been informed of anything different. Whether Dom's able to sort of tell you something that I don't know, I'll bring him in.
Yeah, can I pick this one up, please, Chair?
Yes, Dom.
Thank you, Mike. I think you're referring to the business rates relief that was offered to enterprise-owned businesses to locate onto the sites. That came to an end at the end of March 21 nationally. So there is that kind of hiatus at the moment to where we're working together with the developers and the landowners to say, what can we put in place to replace that incentive, or are there other incentives indeed that we can consider in terms of soft support to land these businesses or to support businesses grow on our enterprise zone. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. I am planning to take a paper to the business board in March as an update. We are doing a little bit of a review. Colleagues in our monitoring and evaluation team are doing a current review on our enterprise zones to see the impact and the whether they delivered against their original objectives from when they're incepted to now. So that findings and that report should be made available. And again, I will be taking that to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Vanessa?
I think that concludes what I have to present to you.
Okay. Thank you. And I note on 5.6, we've still the equity investment data to come.
Yes, unfortunately, due to COVID illnesses, we just weren't able to get that information together for you.
Okay. Well, we'll see that in January, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Thank you, Vanessa. Any more questions, anyone? All right. I think on this point, The recommendation is to note the financial positioning relating to the revenue and capital funding lines within the Business and Skills Directorate for 2021 financial year. I would like to remind members that recommendations to the Business Board are carried by consensus unless there is an objection, in which case there will be a vote. In the event of a vote, the Democratic Services Officer will ask each member whether they wish to vote in favour or against the recommendation, or indeed abstain. As this recommendation is just to note, it looks like we're all in violent agreement. Can we agree that this has been noted? Any objections? Very good, thank you. Excellent job, Vanessa, thank you. Easy to understand, thank you. Good job. We'll move on to item 2.2, the Strategic Funds Management Review with Steve Clark, please. Are you there, Steve?
Yep, good afternoon, Chair and Board. So this report provides the Board with a strategic update to the 1st of October. Before I begin presenting through the paper, I'd like to clarify a small change to one of the recommendations at recommendation B. It actually states that officers to make relevant changes to the local assurance framework in the second part of that sentence, and it should actually read for the monitoring officer to make any relevant changes to that local assurance framework. So just clarifying that up front. So in terms of the report, so program spend as at 1st of October, the Local Growth Fund program had expended 137.325 million of its 147 million. This is obviously following capital swap earlier in the year at 31st of March. The Getting Building Fund, 14.6 million, was fully awarded and paid over, apart from the £827,000 grant to Peterborough City Council. The grant funding agreement is all ready to be signed off, but is subject to a change request that's further in this paper. The Business Board also awarded a further 2 million from its recycled funding budget in June this year to the University Phase 3 project. That award was conditional on securing the funding package from Levelling Up Fund, which is now confirmed as awarded to Peterborough City Council in the budget statement on the 27th of October. In terms of programme monitoring, the Business Board is asked to note the latest monitoring report at Appendix 1 to this paper. The most recent monitoring update there shows that we've now attributed 4,621 actual new jobs created from all projects. Also, the total forecast has been, for all jobs, has been revised upwards across all of our projects by 1,020 jobs. This is because of some further discussions and an agreed revision with Lancaster Way Business Park by combining the three funding awards that they've received to date from Local Growth Fund. Project updates by exception. The Wisbeach Access Strategy project, as was mentioned in questions earlier, the final project accounts reconciliation has been conducted and completed with CCC and the finance team, and the unspent figure of LGF being repatriated is 3.7 million. However, there could be additional funds beyond that because Cambridgeshire County Council made prepayments for utilities works in the project. They're in the process of cancelling and reclaiming those refunds back from that. And obviously any funding received from them in that respect will be automatically paid back to us. Obviously we await for a figure on what those prepaid funds are going to be for those prepaid works. As the project failed to meet its delivery milestones, officers, as requested by the board, have produced a short report on lessons learned, and that report is attached at Appendix 2 to this paper. Next project update, the University Phase 2, the Materials Research Centre. The Business Board is asked to consider the project change request at Appendix 3. This relates to the infrastructure element of the Phase 2 project, and it actually requests for a decrease in the amount of match funding contribution from Peterborough City Council to be able to deliver the project. The original approved project plan had Peterborough City Council providing 1.9 million of funding as match to the original 2.7 million budget. But actually, the project now only requires a smaller amount, 1.3 million total, with the overall size and scope of the car park actually being reduced. The amount now being proposed to be provided by Peterborough City Council as match is a maximum of 500,000. This means the intervention rate of the Getting Building Fund is in fact increased compared to the match funding element provided from PCC. So the board is obviously asked to consider and approve recommendation of the change request. OneCam Limited, the Combined Authority Board, as Vanessa has already outlined, did approve returning the whole LGF amount from that particular project, the 995,000. So we await, as we say, repatriation. Community Renewal Fund update. I have a verbal update on that, which is different to what's in the paper. This follows an announcement last week by government that we had been successful, this combined authority successful with 2 of the 7 projects that have been submitted into the Community Renewal Fund. In England, there was a total of 125 million assigned, and CPCA has been awarded 3.4 million. That's 2.7% of the whole total across 2 projects. The Start and Grow, which is a entrepreneur support program, both pre-start and start-up into post 3-year phase. And that's to be delivered across Peterborough, Fenland and Huntingdonshire. The second project that was approved was Turning Point, which is a skills and employment transition program, again across Peterborough and Fenland. The Start and Grow project was the largest single successful bid out of 477 projects awarded across the UK. The challenge we've got is the project has to be delivered by the end of 30th of June 22. This is obviously an extended delivery date from the original due to the delay in announcements. The grant funding will be paid to the combined authority in 2 tranches for these projects. A portion at the end of December this year, and then the balance when the projects are finished in July 2022. So the combined authority will be required to cash flow these projects because it will be retrospectively claimed back and repaid. We've commenced project mobilisation internally. We'll be moving fast once we've got approval from the CPCA on the project to get grant funding agreements and contracts in for delivery. Delivery will be through the existing contract that Growth Co have with the GrowthWorks project. The award also includes a 2% management fee for the combined authority to manage, monitor and contract these projects. The projects which were unsuccessful in the CRF award were Innovate to Zero, Cambridge and Peterborough Region of Learning, The Place, Connect, Create and Grow, Unleashing Fenland's Potential and Fenland's Sustainable Futures. All projects have been notified that were unsuccessful. I'll keep going and save questions till the end if that's okay.
Yeah, do that, Steve, and then we'll break this down.
Yeah, recycled funding investment strategy. So we've heard that we've got funding being returned. it actually totals 7 million when you add the CAM to it. The business board is asked to consider some options around what to do with the recycled funding. So option A could be to run an open call across the whole combined authority area with the limited budget mentioned against the existing call criteria that we are operating from the local industrial strategy in 2019. Or option B, to run a call for proposals against the recycled funding in spring 22 based on a refreshed business and skills strategy, which you've all heard we're developing and will be brought forward to the business board and the combined authority board in March as well. Or C, to create and ring fence project and service contingency fund of up to 1 million to provide the ability for the business board to react and adapt, or be able to meet any short-term market opportunities that might provide significant increases to outcomes of existing projects or services. So given the recycle funds are still relatively modest in this sense, allocating a significant proportion of the recycle funds to option B to support large-scale levelling up and shared prosperity bids with a strong leverage and a high impact outcomes has advantages as the best value for money option. However, we could reserve a portion of the money for option C to take account of any high impact opportunities that may present themselves. So the business board have previously discussed that there is a need to be able to consider and react to new opportunities as they present themselves, and this being outside of a live call for proposals. So should option C be approved by the business board, officers, it will work with the monitoring officer to seek the necessary changes to the current approval processes and the local assurance framework. And as mentioned, we'll also in tandem bring forward a proposed process in January for processing potential opportunities. So officers are currently in the process of looking at modifying the local assurance framework as part of its review, and that will be coming forward in January as well. So the business board is asked to recommend to the combined authority board approval of the proposed strategy for investing business board recycled funds as a 85%, 15% mix between options B and C respectively. Future funding. On the 27th of October, the government did not announce any further information about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So we obviously await information on that, expecting that it may well now not be until beginning of next year, potentially the spring, before we can actually react to run for calls, prepare our process for the UK Shared Prosperity funding. At the same time, though, the government did announce that the Levelling Up Round 1 funding was awarded, and the combined authority area was successful in supporting Peterborough City Council get 20 million application for the University of Phase 3 project. That's the conclusion of the report. I'll take your questions now. Apologies, there's quite a lot in there.
Thank you, Steve. Good job. Let's just break this down into three pieces for the discussion, if we may. I mean, Steve has kindly given us an update on where he is with the various moving parts before we come on to the specifics of the Peterborough Phase 2 and what we do with the recycle funds. Does anyone have any particular questions on the update per se, or any concerns? Andy, is your hand raised in relation to that? If so, please go ahead.
It's related to both, but I'll do this one first, then I'll come back for the second one. So the first one, Steve, on the update was about the projects that have been approved, Start and Grow and Turning Point. Great, they've been approved. You mentioned that they've got to be delivered by June 2022. And I was interested in what happens afterwards, because I mean, if you take you take both of those projects, June 2022, when you've taken Christmas into account, it's basically 6 months away. And there's a danger that we chuck a load of money at something with no longer term strategy for how they're supported thereafter. So what's going to happen post June 2022 on those two projects?
Well, the first point to note, Community Renewal Fund was always a pilot programme. That was how it was billed by government. They were seeking projects which could test models of delivery, which, you know, we didn't have necessarily a centralised, locally led startup scheme. And of course, with COVID, employment support provision was obviously something we were thinking about. The long delay by government in approving these hasn't necessarily helped. But that said, you know, we were always going to have potentially 6 months to deliver these. A high proportion of the Start and Grow is a grant scheme. So I have some confidence that when the market gets to understand what's available, I think it will go. In terms of learning from these and what do you do next, there is a requirement within these to have an evaluation, an evaluator from day one, so we can learn as we go. And expectation is that, you know, what you learn from it could be augmented or rolled into new projects in Shared Prosperity Fund. We chose to go through GrowthWorks because it provides us with the vehicles there, if you like, to be able to run and provide this and test the market.
So I guess there's a question for me. I mean, we should welcome the funding and the support for the project clearly, but I just wonder, there's a question for me about whether the business board or the combined authority should be making the point back to central government that actually these short-term 6 months funding for this, 3 months funding for that, reply by Tuesday for this is a really inefficient way of allocating public money to build long-term sustainable capability in regions. We need to be, it would be responsible of us to actually go back and highlight that to government if that's a commonly held view, but it just seems to me it's a really inefficient way of allocating public money.
Point taken. Yeah,
I think the point's very well made, Andy. Let's capture that thought for a minute. John, you've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you, Austin. Yeah, just to put a bit of detail on that, Andy. The points you make are completely valid as always in the generic. Making those points about this particular call may not entirely be appropriate because the CRF was launched as a pilot for SPF. So what they're actually saying here, when other organisations like us were saying, well, it's going to take us time to develop ideas for an SPF bid, and we need support in doing that. That's what the CRF was for. It's money to say, okay, then, well, here's some money for you for 6 months to test something. If you can test it as a model and show us some outcomes, then that can potentially be an SPF project in the summer. So I think in this case, they are relatively valid in how they've done it. Although when we look at the generic of LUF and the Get Building Fund before that, your points are exactly right.
Thank you, John. Mike, do you want to come in on the same point?
Yeah, I just verifying that sort of Gately actually put in a bid for this, so they have sort of designed and spec'd this out. So is that right?
No, what we put the bid in, but we consulted with them, so we did it together. Really,
Yeah,
it's a partnership, but it was a combined authority bid for both of these.
But in cooperation with them, so they are highly confident they can deliver in 6 months.
Okay, would it be possible to get a copy of the bid? I'd be quite interested in seeing it.
Yeah, no problem.
It's just an area I know quite a lot about. So it's also an area that where one of the universities could potentially help as well, I'd have thought.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Maybe a softer way of capturing Andy's thoughts, which I think are very well made, is if you know, if they're running this as almost a prototyping process, that we do a quick lessons learned at the end of it and capture those comments. It might be a more palatable way of getting the point across.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Any other comments on the more general update, and then we'll turn to the specific recommendations. All right, I don't see any other hands, so let's move to recommendation A, which is the recommend that the combined authority approve the project change request for the University of Peterborough Phase 2 car park infrastructure project. Does anyone have any specific questions or concerns on that point? Mike? Andy, sorry, Andy Williams, do you have your hand up?
Thanks, Austin. I'm going to look at a rarely used metric, cost per space. So we reduced it from 500 car parking spaces to a quarter of that, and the cost's gone down by 50%. So cost per parking space has gone up by 50%. So I guess I'm not against the car park per se, and I'm very in favour of helping Peterborough Council as much as possible to reduce their costs. So don't worry about that way. I think it's just, are we making a short-term decision where we could be, if we bought the whole car park now and it's going to be needed, would it be cheaper than just doing this temporary fix? It's more complicated now by, is the grant 827 of $1 million or 827 of 1.3 million? So will it reduce if the actual cost of the car park is cheaper? And then perhaps getting away from the technical metrics, which I know are quite dull, to be honest, is if in the future the business board are going to be contributing to projects like this, should we have an element of our overall strategy in there? In other words, if our sustainability strategy is we always want electric charging points within facilities like this, is this something where we're contributing more, we should have more to do with, rather than it just being a car park? And you may well have EV charging points in there. But so the general point is, can we have a guidelines on how we will fund these sort of projects from a sustainability perspective? And like I say, my more technical question is, are we basically paying twice as much for half the spaces, which seems like a bit of a short-termist measure?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't know if John might want to answer some of this in terms of how we've arrived at the car parking space costs. Part of the issue is obviously it's the tenants of the PropCo building, which it has a correlation between what potentially gets charged for using the car park back through to the tenants. So I do take your point, Andy. It could be that longer term this was not the best way to do it, but I guess it's a question of available funding at this very point in time. Planners wouldn't obviously wait, you know, they wouldn't wait. We're building phase 2 now, so you know, to not have a car parking solution coming down the pipe is, you know, is not palatable. Obviously there's been studies, PCC have been doing their own car parking strategy and their overall spaces provision across the city. So, you know, the planners, there's an angle there as well to say that we didn't need as many, and we may not need as many in the future, given the greener strategies, as you've already indicated. On the point about EV charging, we are looking at that in terms of new projects going forwards, building in an element of that in our grant funding agreements, and looking for it to be the items for approval within projects. So that might be not just EV charging points, that might be other net zero reducing elements too.
Thank you, Steve.
I don't know if John wants to add about car parking cost reduction or per space increase.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, there is a little bit of a difference. 2.7 million for just a bit under 400 would have been 6.75 per space. The 1.3 is showing at a higher value than that, although they've asked, PCC have asked for a maximum of 500, and the expectation is it'll come in at something like 1.1, I personally think, which will be something more like 7.8, 8.2. So it is higher, but I think it's a reflection on a smaller area. I think the other point is, given phase 2 only needs 128 spaces, we simply didn't need 400. But with your point, Andy, about take the 400 because they'll be useful in the further stages. Phase 3, which we've just got approved, and phase 5, which we're hopefully moving towards quite quickly, would require significantly more than those. So there is coming down the path in the next year or so, really quite a big car parking issue and an opportunity, which wouldn't have been solved with the medium level car park of 400. So we took the view to minimize the cost, the absolute cost, as much as we could, to 1.3, and get us away with a car park that met our needs for building 2 right now, and then to crack the bigger nut of a bigger car parking issue later.
Thank you, John. Certainly worth capturing Andy's points then, if there's further expenditure on car parks to come. I see Councillor Fitzgerald has his hand raised. Wayne.
John more or less said what I was going to say. I think it's about future proofing to some degree, that, you know, it's better to put in the infrastructure, put in the future proofing now, because despite what people might want, cars aren't going away. You know, Peterborough is a city of great road networks. Yes, I'm all for active travel, sustainable travel, cycling, walking, encourage as much of that as we can. But if the master planning goes the way that I envisage it going in terms of the redevelopment of that whole area, there will be a need for car parking for everything, not just the university. So some degree of future proofing is not a bad idea. A little bit of pain at the outset perhaps eases it a little way down the road, Andy. So I think it's kind of, we haven't got a crystal ball, but let's put it this way, it's all going in the right direction. If we didn't do it now, we'd only be going, why did we do that in the first place? Which is why we're often accused of wasting money if we have to go and dig it. It's a bit like, you know, you resurface a pavement and then the water board comes along and digs it all up the next week. So let's not do that with car parks. Build the foundations for decking, by the way. I think I did say that to John, did I not?
Yes.
That's one of the things I'm thinking of, Wayne. Yeah. Can we make sure this current car park is future-proofed rather than just a cheaper measure?
I wouldn't have knee-jerk reaction and caved in terms of I would have kept the original proposal, personally speaking. But if we put the appropriate foundations in, it can be decked still.
Yeah, if I may, and it is very, very, very likely that the planning application for a bigger car park will be on this footprint. So we are doing it in the right place.
As long as we put the right things in the ground, then it can be built on, can't it?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions to that point. We'll take that recommendation in isolation before we move on to the next part, if we may. Do we have any objections to carrying that recommendation forward to go to the combined authority? Okay, then we'll consider recommendation A carried. Thank you for that. Let's move on to item B then, which is the recommend to the combined authority approves the proposed strategy for investing in business board recycle funds and for the monitoring officer to make any relevant changes to the local assurance framework, which relates to item 7 and the options set out as A, B and C. And I'm taking it, Steve, as you articulated verbally, that the recommendation from officers is an 85-15 mix of items B and C. Just confirm that for me, please.
Yes, that was right.
Okay. So thoughts and questions on this? I mean, there are lots of different options here. Andy?
So I'm certainly supportive of being deliberate and strategic about how we invest the money. My only question, I guess, was that it was whether the suggestion, because I'd heard two different forms of the wording in what you'd said, Steve. So one was that we should base the call under option B, we should base the call on the refreshed business and skills strategy, full stop. Yeah. The second was that we should base it on the refreshed business and skills strategy, but particularly linked to UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Levelling Up Fund. And my slight worry about putting the second half of that sentence in, linking it explicitly to UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Levelling Up Fund, is, as we know, those are targeted at part of the region effectively rather than the whole region. And I'm not sure at this stage that we want to put a constraint around it, which means that we couldn't have a call that applied to the whole region.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Andy. I think they were the thing here was it's about what's coming down the track, and you could argue tying options to one type of funding. So that's why it mentioned both UK Shared Prosperity and Levelling Up and our strategy. So it gave it options. But I take your point. Yeah.
So if it was in any of the three, it could be linked to the strategy or the Shared Prosperity Fund or the Levelling Up Fund, then I'm quite comfortable with it. It was just I didn't want to accidentally end up with a set of words that meant we couldn't have a call that applied to the whole region. Yeah,
I believe what we're trying to say there is that it applies to those strategic funds that give us a very strong leverage, if you like, and a very good chance of winning those funds over as well.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that clarification, Steve. Worth making sure that's just checked in the minutes, that properly reflects what's been said there for clarity. I think Rebecca was next.
Thanks, Austin. Yes, I would absolutely support this. I think, option A, the world has moved on a great deal since 2019, and therefore it would be absolutely sensible to base it on the new strategy. My question is around in section C, it talks, 7.1C, it talks about bids up to 400,000 could be considered. And I just wanted to understand the rationale of why that figure was highlighted.
I think it was basically looking at what we've got, we've seen already in terms of projects. And also, it was, you want to do, if you're gonna end up with £1 million, you want to be able to do at least two. Otherwise, it looks a bit odd, doesn't it? If you said it's just £1 million, come forward. Well, someone's going to come forward for £1 million. So, it was to make sure that we could do more than one project, but within the actual pipeline, there's some very small bids. But there's only a few that are around this level, and then they jump into the X multiples of millions. So it was just considered that this was perhaps a good level. The other aspect is within our current process, projects that are 500,000 and over, we take to an entrepreneurs panel. There is the possibility here that we could not have to do that stage. Although that's something we could still do if the board wished.
Thanks, Steve.
Presumably, Steve, if something came out of the woodwork at 600,000, which was a real slam dunk of an opportunity, you'd bring it back to the board for a discussion in any event, yeah? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. John, you came and went. Are you back again?
I did. Thank you, Austin. I sort of thought, shall I say it or shall I not say it? So it goes back to Andy's point about leverage using SPF and LUF. And one of the things we'll ask Steve to do in January is come back with more detail. If the board agree a combination of B and C, he'll come back in January with more detail on what the criteria would be for funneling the existing £4.4 billion worth of proposals we've got on the books through the 85% and the 15%. And Steve and I have penned out an early stage of what that might look like, and hopefully you'll be reassured that I've got 5 criteria on the big projects, that the 6 million there. And actually criteria 1 is, of course, the compliance and alignment with the new strategy and the sector strategies contained within it. Number 2 is straight VFM, as you'd probably expect. Number 3 is a set of SMART objectives that the new Green Book process will require us to do around our strategy, that become SMART objectives within any call. So it's sort of a bit more of a detailed version of, does it align with our strategy? Then the 5th one is deliverability. Can we actually do it? And actually the last one, Andy, was, what's the chances of leverage out of the SPF and LUF? So, you know, we've definitely got it sorted. So it's the best project, not the projects that have leverage.
Great, thank you.
John, appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Are there any other comments? I personally, I think that, you know, this balance is right. The thing I might worry a little bit about is certainly on option B, whether we can come up with ambitious enough projects to utilize the leverage opportunity. And that's an area where I would encourage officers to be working more closely with councillors to help them to understand what some of those opportunities might look like, and be a bit braver perhaps, and a bit more ambitious in going to government with more substantial asks there. The exercise that we've just been through, I mean, we talk a lot about lessons learned when things don't perhaps go as well as we would have hoped. But just reflecting on the university phase 3 bid, I mean, that's a magic recipe. If we can just replicate that thinking in how we put those bids together, and target it at other high growth opportunities in whatever form that be, maybe not necessarily value add, but in whatever the deliverable is, but go large and be bigger and bolder in our asks. John, do you want to come back on that point?
Yeah, and just to say, we have and we will, and you're absolutely right, Austin. If you actually look at the phase 3 LUF, that was a full 20 million, and we were one of, like, within the 100 that got bid approved. We were like within 5 who actually asked for the whole 20 million. Goodness knows why. So we were ambitious there. The startup program that Steve was behind for CRF was the largest CRF award. So again, we were big, and I very much take your point and your challenge to challenge the councils and the council officers to be ambitious and think big. And the other CRF bids that were put forward were small and they didn't get approved. So it doesn't really help to be modest, I don't think, with government at this point in time.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that's certainly a message I'll carry from the business board back to the combined authority board when we put this recommendation to them. So just to move this point on then, it sounds like we're broadly all in agreement, but if we go back to the actual recommendation, are there any objections to the recommendation on the table? I don't see any, so we'll consider that carried. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 3.1, the agri-tech sector strategy and action plan. I believe Martin Luckman's going to present the report. Martin, are you with us? Emily?
Stephen, just to say, I'm afraid I can't get through to Martin at the moment, but I'll keep chasing. Can I propose we move to item 3.2 in the meantime, and I'll try Martin again.
All right, we'll do.
Apologies.
No problem. Let's flip to item 3.2, the Business Board Annual Report. I believe Dom's going to present the annual report.
Oh, yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. So business board members would have received the final annual report in its PDF form. So I hope that was all received well and well received. This report is really just to formalise that process and really just to kind of get the final version formally in front of the board to note and to sign off. But we're also asking for some additional funding to finalise the kind of phase 2 of this, which is the business board microsite, and I'll go into that in a minute. So as we all know, the annual report is an opportunity for us to kind of illustrate what the business board has achieved over the past year, and then demonstrating its successes and what it looks forward to in terms of future interventions over the next kind of 12 months going forward. It's something that we need to do on an annual basis. It's our commitment to government that we do report annually. But this year we took a bit of a different approach. We wanted to really set the foundations to really showcasing what the business board does, has achieved, and really what the direction it's heading to a lot better, not just through publications, but also online as well. So an important phase of this was the microsite. And that's really to make sure that we have the dedicated business board pages on our combined authority website, so clients and customers can better navigate to find out more about the business board, be it for support purposes or even governance purposes, but also to continue to showcase what we do and to set out where we are heading, as we've just heard from other colleagues like Steve and John, in terms of future support and funding opportunities. So just to bring it back to what we're asking in terms of the board's approval. So we originally allocated £35,000 budget to undertake a business board performance evaluation. Now that has been commissioned and it's underway, and the board will hear back from some initial findings in the new year from January and March onwards. But that's not costing as much as we originally anticipated. And we've got some capacity of underspend within that budget. The microsite is going a little bit beyond the original scope of what we anticipated when we kicked off the annual report process. As I explained, we are looking at how we enhance the website rather than just having a one-pager kind of dashboard, which I think was the original plan. Unfortunately, that means that the cost has gone up, and we need to cover that cost. And it made sense that we asked for the underspend to be reallocated, if the board approves, to be spent not on the performance evaluation, but on the on development of the dashboard of the microsite. And I think that's it. And I commend the report to the board. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Dom. All right, let's throw this open to any questions, comments. I think Andy was first with his hand.
Just a quick thing. Dom, you said that we should have had a PDF copy through. Is that right? Or are we? I mean, we've got the PDF copy clearly in the papers, but it hasn't been circulated otherwise, has it?
Should have received a copy in the post, Andy. I'll double check. We did send all the members a copy, a hard copy, and an e-copy as well.
It may have gone to the office. So where is it on the business board website? Because I just tapped in.
It's going up as soon as it's been noted and signed off by the board.
Fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Dom, we go to Faye, please.
Yeah, hi. I would just query the doubling of the budget for, a brochure and a website, even though it's a dashboard. It just seems like a bit of a hike in price. So I don't know the organisation that are doing it, but it might be worthwhile if Rebecca or myself take a look at it. It just seems a little bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
I will put you in contact with Ed Coleman, who's leading on this from our side. I do understand that it was, properly procured and you went through the proper processes, but your input is, of course.
It's just, and I get that, but to have gone through this process and then now when it's let's make it happen on the website, which to be honest could have probably worked at the same time. It just seems like it's a significant increase. I don't disagree with the fact we need to do it and integrate our comms, and you know, make sure things are released at the same time.
Thank you, Faye. Very good point. Appreciate you stepping in to give a little audit of that for us. Thank you. Mike?
Yes, thanks. I just wondered about when you mentioned about dashboards, that I think we're having dashboards for growth works as well, aren't we? And I just wonder if these are going to be sort of integrated on the site.
Yes, so Mike, thank you. So yes, this microsite is looking at linking those all together and joining them all together. So we've got the dashboard for the, like you said, for the growth works. We do have a business insight dashboard that we regularly publish as well. And Steve and his team are working on a local growth fund stroke strategic investment dashboard as well. So it's going to bring that all together in one place. Because at the moment, the website is not ideal. It is difficult and a challenge to navigate and to get to information. So it would, you know, we are going to put it all together and make it and put it all in one place. Thank you.
All right, Dom. I mean, a bit of feedback from me. I don't see any other hands raised.
I've got, sorry, I thought my hand was up, but.
Sorry, Nitin, I didn't see you there.
Okay, I just got a very basic question. Who's it targeted to? The board report. Who's it going to go to and who's the target for reading it? And how are we going to get them to read it?
The annual report?
Yeah.
Yes. So we've got a, so Ed and colleagues in our comms team have worked up together with our input, a PR plan and a comms plan.
Yeah, but who is it? Really I mean, got to get 35,000 copies. Who are we targeting to send to? I mean, I've got one.
We're not going to have 35,000.
We're not going to print 35,000 copies, Nitin.
No.
Okay.
No. We were only going to print minimal copies for business board members for their use and to share with the combined authority members and colleagues. But predominantly, this will be shared socially and electronically.
Right. So we've got it, and we're going to work within ourselves to try and spread it out rather than do anything specific.
Yes, we have a specific PR plan that was set out in the board report, and we are still working with colleagues to work that up, make sure that we are fully publicising this, but alongside all the other stuff that we're working on as well, the growth works and the other stuff that we are publicising.
Yeah, and that's my point, that, you know, it's good for us to have a look, and we need some of that information, but how do we get it to the people who should be looking at it to see, is it working for them?
Okay, so the intention with the hard copy, Nitin, was only that it would be a very small print run.
Yeah.
And there would be, you know, few people who would ever be the recipients of that. So from me personally, I've sent a copy to Stephen Barclay with a nice letter saying if only the other LEPs in the UK could perform as well as this, we maybe wouldn't be having the LEP review to the extent that we are. You know, it's useful with a very targeted audience when you're trying to make a point. Every time we put a bid into government, I would expect us to have one of these copies in the bundle to say, you know, this is supported by the business board. And here, if you want to understand what the business board has done and what their performance is like, here it is. There's the document to substantiate it. So the hard copy is very much targeted at that kind of an approach. There's not going to be a mass mailing exercise and a big print exercise on those at all. It's more to reinforce our argument and support our credibility going forward with what we want to do in that respect. The mass publication, the advice from the marketing people was, rather than do that, to move it onto a website portal where we can try and attract people to come in and see those things and develop it beyond it's a report, it's a living, breathing document with the dashboards and all the interaction that make those things fun to go and have a look at, rather than here's a link to a dry report that you can sit and read that no one ever looks at. That was what we agreed collectively.
I'm just wondering how we're going to get people to come and look at it is really the key, because, you know, I understand, you know, it's useful to send to people to say this is what we've done, but how do we get the people we're doing it for understand this is what we've done if they don't get access to it?
Right. John, are you waiting in the wings to come in on that point?
Austin, yeah. So I think between I think there are three basic audiences here. The
Yeah.
first one, Austin alluded to, which I think is the primary one, which is basically the stakeholders that decide whether or not to give us money. I think this is a credibility reinforcing sales document that you don't lead with it as your offer. You actually are, just as Austin said, you're using it as a credibility backup for what you're asking for at any one time, to say, give us money, you can trust us, look what we've done. So I think its primary audience is the people who give us money. I think the secondary audience are the various stakeholders locally, which would include businesses. But again, I think it's around the local authority and the business organisations like Make UK, etc. It's about using it with them to reinforce that we are actually quite good at what we do, and they should partner with us and they should promote us to their members. I don't see this being used as part of the sale to a particular company. I think GrowthWorks, for instance, should just work with a company on the offer that they're offering the company at the time. And then I think that the last set is people, the public. And I think the way to get to them isn't probably to get them to come and look at this on a website. It's to use the press with a document like this, that where we've got the press backing us and saying this is a great organisation, it's really delivering. So I think that's where it plays a role. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Faye.
So, John, I really like that explanation. I think that was very cohesive and, a good approach, which makes me go back to the budget and go, so why don't we just spend 15 grand more doing more PR? Just saying it.
I think that's right. And I think, we'd value your input on that with Ed in terms of, once I've set out what I think we're trying to achieve, I think we very much value people like yourself and your opinion on, well, I'm not sure you're going about doing that the right way then. So we'd be very much valuing your opinion and input.
All right.
As an action, can I
I'll take one more comment, Dom, then we'll move on.
Yeah. Can I take an action back? I will work with Ed. We do have this sub-working group that Faye and Rebecca sit on. So I'll make sure that Ed we'll arrange one over the next few weeks. And see if we can get one together and see if we can progress this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dom. So with that qualification and caveat, the recommendation is to note the business board annual report formally, so we can release that, and to note the need for further funding beyond the current allocation for the annual report to develop the business board microsite, and the intention to request a vehement from the forecast underspend on the business board effectiveness review to cover these costs. Do we have any objections to that, subject to the caveats that we'll take a good value for money view at it? All right, perfect. Okay, we'll consider that carried. Thank you, Dom, for that. Are we in a position to go back to Martin, Emily? Did we find him? We lost Emily as well.
Apologies, I'm trying to help Martin with the technical side of things. I'm going to suggest that we might have to ask Steve Clark to take us through this one in the interest of time. I can't say another agenda item.
No. Steve, could you have a go at this, please? I'm sure Tina will chip in and help if we miss anything of significance.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot, Steve, but if you
yeah,
could,
no, it's fine. And I was going to suggest, obviously, Tina might want to chip in as well. So I don't know if you want to go first, Tina, or do you want me to set the scene?
No, I'm happy to do it. It might be just quicker. So you'll remember that agri-tech was one of the 4 strategies in the local, one of the 4 important sectors in the local industrial strategy. And you'll remember that Promar International was commissioned to produce a strategy to guide the board in its decision making alongside the other strategies. The Promar report, I think the wording here is it provided a helpful start. So it helped us to understand the makeup, some of the strengths, and some of the opportunities in the CPCA, but we felt that a more succinct, focused report was needed with a clearer set of recommendations. And so Agritech E, it used to be Agritech East, was commissioned to deliver this work. And so basically they brought together a group of well-known players in Agritech in the area, and chaired a virtual workshop, which was precluded is not the right word, which was people had to prepare beforehand specific questions that you've got here, and then they were presented to the group, and an action plan was developed around that on the day really, and then Agritech E produced the report that you'd seen. So I think one of the most important, oh, Martin's here now, one of the most important things that was recognised is, and this is something I know, and I think many of you know, that the CPCA geography is becoming globally renowned for agritech. So it's not like we need to assimilate all of this agritech. It's there and it exists, and it is globally recognised. So it's where do we take it from there? Sorry, Martin, I was just doing an introduction as you.
No, that's fine. I'm staying behind you clapping. Carry on.
So all I've done is to talk about the basic background and how we carried out the workshop. So if you want to go on to what the intervention suggestions were.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sincere apologies for my lateness during the meeting. So in essence, there were 5 recommendations, 5 big groups of recommendations. I'm not proposing to go through them line by line, and I think most of them are attached to Agritech East's report, and they were color coded depending on the priority and an attempt at a costing. But in essence, just to give you a bit of a flavour, this was around providing an enabling environment for to support agritech startup and scale up, and then following that specific report and support for farmers, help them de-risk the cost for bringing in new technology and adopting, and then ultimately it's around skills development and accelerating the journey to achieve a net zero. They're the major groupings that were highlighted in the report. And then there's some other information there around the need for closer alignment with life sciences, advanced manufacturing and digital. So agritech shouldn't be seen as a sector in blissful isolation, but very much as an opportunity to tie in the other 3 critical sectors, which was highlighted in the former local industrial strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be the main thing that would draw to the board's attention, really.
Thank you, Martin.
Can I add that one of the things that came out in the discussion was the recognised success of the Eastern Agritech Growth Initiative Programme Board that Martin led on, and how that had enabled farmers it had de-risked some of the technology applications onto farm and helped to move research projects a bit further along. And it was funding and supporting in that gap where there is no other source of funding. So that was part of the recognition for that initiative. It was also felt that something along the lines of the accelerators we've seen in life sciences would be would be important for agri-tech. There's nothing really like that. There's plenty of angel funds, but very little else. So to build on what the combined authority has already done, and on the strengths of the region, there are a few specific interventions that we've seen in other sectors which would be useful.
Thank you, Tina. Andy? Andy Neely.
Yeah, so I wanted to welcome this. I think it's a really good step forward from where we were previously, and I thought the recommendations were eminently sensible. I guess my question, and it's one for John or possibly the mayor, is about the financial implications of this and the longer term support, because we're asked to adopt the strategy, which we can do, but then there's a comment about coming back for with costed proposals to think about business cases for particular investments in the future, and the question is how we think we might get access to the funding we need to make sure we can support those proposals. But overall, I really welcomed it.
Thank you, Andy. John, we come back on the funding angles. So.
Yes, absolutely, Chair. So yeah, this is indeed, excuse me, this is indeed an example of how we would handle the LGF recycling, in that maybe the costed interventions would come forward, and they're just that good. We'd fund them with the LGF alone because they've got great VFM. Or maybe we would look, as with all the other projects in the pipeline, from other strategies, because each of the sector strategies, as you'll appreciate, came up with interventions, and our main strategy will come up with interventions. So they'll all go into the same pot and be assessed in terms of, should we fund it anyway from LGF? Can we make a case for gain share? And can we pump prime it with LGF and use, let's say, 1 million of LGF to get 10 million of shared prosperity fund? So these will go into an implementation plan that will be associated in March with our business and skills plan that will have all the interventions, and then assess each one in terms of which ones we are going to back. Obviously, they won't all get backed because there are many more projects like this, and there are funds available.
Thank you, John. Andy, did you want to come back on that same point? Or?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, thanks, John. That's helpful. I wonder whether we also need to think about other central government departments that we might be taking this to. So DEFRA would be an obvious one here, where actually some of these projects we might go to DEFRA and say, these are so important, we want to be a pilot of the region, and they would actually help you with some of the things that you would like to achieve. The same potentially is true with Innovate UK, and going straight to Indro Mukherjee, who runs Innovate UK, and saying actually how could we collaborate with Innovate to do some of this stuff. So it's worth thinking in the round about where we might go for the funding.
Yeah, that's an absolutely brilliant point, and yes, we should.
Thank you both. Tina, did you want to come back in?
Yes, I just wanted to make sort of links to Andy's point about DEFRA. You know that DEFRA very much have the Fenland peat soils on their radar, and the carbon emissions that come from Fenland peat being, huge, one of the largest in the country, and we have most of the lowland peat in the CPCA area. So if agri-tech can do something, can focus on something, for me, that would be the thing that we should be looking at, and going to DEFRA to say, look, we're doing this, can you help?
Yeah. Thank you, Tina. I think Mike was next, and then we'll go to the mayor.
Thanks, Austin. One sort of experience I've sort of had from the past was where you have great opportunities like this, and then it becomes too limited because you require both the technology and the pilot area to be in the same place. Whereas quite often what you want to do is to establish this region as a great place to do pilots and attract technology in from the outside as well, and to bring that innovation in. which in the end will usually lead to inward investment as well. But it means that some of that funding might be, if you like, seeping outside, but for long-term benefits.
Thank you, Mike. I'll go to the Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Austin, and thank you to all. I've just been listening in and just wanted to reassure you that the idea of liaising with DEFRA as another department, ministerial department down in Westminster, is very much on the agenda. I've spoken with Paul Rains, our Director of Strategy, and I don't know, John, if you want to kind of catch up with him as well, because we have been sending off letters with a view to speaking to them, particularly with regards to the peat situation, and that's a knock-on effect from obviously the combined authority adopting Baroness Brown's Independent Climate Commission and those recommendations. So where Agritrek and the desire to improve things from a climate point of view collide, I'm sure there's lots of opportunities. It's certainly something that we're exploring, but it's thank you for bringing to attention.
Thank you, Matt. John?
Yeah, just to respond initially to that. Yeah, Martin and I and Steve will link with Paul and make sure that we're connected in with whatever letters we're sending to DEFRA and asking for money. So we'll do that. And just responding to Mike's point, yes, we totally get you might not be a company in the area, but we'd still want to work with you. And one of the innovations that caused a few eyebrows to rise inside the CPCA was the Illumina accelerator. And Tina said accelerator models would be really good for Agritech, and I totally agree. That Illumina accelerator model is where Illumina attracts companies from all over the world to come into Cambridgeshire and to do work with them, and gives them seed capital funding. And we've just, Steve will confirm, we've just signed an agreement one from Israel, and where was the other from?
Poland.
Poland, yeah.
But we've had some from the US as well.
Yeah, so we totally get it, Mike. You don't have to be have a postcode inside Cambridgeshire to be a company that we really want to work with you, because you may be able to deliver things that we can't deliver on our own. So yeah, totally get it.
Especially for cross fertilization, you know, the company may be successful elsewhere doing all of for their sector.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good point, Mike. Thank you. Thank you, John. Go back to Martin, please.
Austin, thank you very much. In fact, the Eastern Agritech Growth Initiative did in fact cover this, where we've got some examples of where the applicant has been successful, although based outside of the geographical qualification area. It's all about where is the activity, and therefore where's the economic benefit to be derived. So for example, you could be a company based in Cambridge, but all the R&D was being done in Scotland, in which case you're not eligible. The reverse of that meant you would be eligible. So it's about trying to capture and hold on to those opportunities as much as possible. But we have got examples of where companies outside the patch have been successful with their application.
Right. Thank you, Martin. Mike?
But you do actually have to promote it outside the patch, though. That's often where it's sort of, sometimes these things can be open to, but they're not actively marketed outside the area.
Martin, you still got your hand raised.
No, so I was trying to find the lower. I do apologise.
All right, perfect. Well, I don't see any other hands raised, and there's some very good points made there. Just before we move on to the recommendations, I personally like to very much thank Tina and Martin for all the hard work, and also Belinda Clark, I think, behind the scenes has made a very positive contribution to pulling this together, hasn't she, Tina? So let's put that on record as a note of thanks. Perhaps one or other of you would relay that back to her for us, please, on behalf of the board. Well deserved. And we'll move to the recommendation, which is A, to approve the agri-tech sector strategy and action plans, and B, to recommend the Combined Authority Board approves adoption of the agri-tech sector strategy / action plan. I'll take both of those together as one recommendation. Are there any objections at all to that, to both of those, one or other? I don't see any, so we'll take that as carried then. Thank you for that. Good job. Well done, everyone.
Thank you.
It's appreciated. Then moving on to part 4, future meetings. So the business board headlines for the combined authority. I mean, there are a number of points that we debated, 2.2 A and B recommendations. So the project change request for the car park, I think is very straightforward. The strategy on the investment of the recycle funds, that's very much our recommendation. So I would certainly hope the combined authority would support that. The agri-tech strategy and action plan that we've just debated, I'll take that forward. And of course, we'll circulate the business board annual report, some of which some of them have already seen that, of course. I think the one thing I'll perhaps add a little bit colour to is on the strategy for investing in the recycle funds, just to revisit this question of ambition, that people are rightly being properly encouraged to come up with big bold plans that we can step in and support, not only in the with officers to help them with the mechanics of getting those bids put together in a manner that we're clearly quite capable of doing, but they are big, ambitious, bold plans that we can get the leverage from if we decide to put the funding in that direction. In terms of the forward plan then, do members have any comments or queries on the published forward plan? I'm not seeing any. In which case we will move to the date of the next meeting, which will be Monday, the 10th of January. That will conclude this meeting. Thank you all for your time, patience and attendance. John, was there something you wanted to come in at the 11th hour there?
There was, Chair. If I may, it's a little bit of a housekeeping issue, but could I suggest that you, Chair, and Emily and some other officers pull forward the business board debrief?
You've gone very muffled, John.
John.
I don't think I'm going to be able to say anything actually, so it wasn't important, and I don't think I've got good enough signal.
Maybe circulate a short email, John, if it's something we need to understand. All righty. Okay, thanks everyone. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.